very excited to introduce our guest speaker this afternoon. She's a painter and photographer, a Seattle native who for the last 30 years has lived in New York. She'll be talking a lot about her background and the latest thing she's doing, so I'm gonna make this very, very quickly. Water has become her major focus of work, as everybody knows. And 2 years ago in 2020, she established thinkaboutwater.com as a site for artists focused on water to come together. So without further ado, Fredericka, may I present Fredericka Foster.
Hi, and thank you so much, Sony, for that introduction. And I would like to start by thanking Alice Clark for getting us all together and introducing me to your group. And I want to thank Liz and Zoni so much for the support that you've given me to make this all come together. I really appreciate it. You may wonder why I'm starting with the nude when I'm a water painter. I had an exhibition. I was a figurative artist, but I was working with mythical biblical themes at this point. And this is Eve leaving Eden with her snakes wrapped around her because she has found snakes very useful for giving her healing medications, for killing the rats in her cave. And I went to New York at this point with my husband, and I continued working on paper. And here is just a couple of examples of what I was doing. I'm showing this because I want you to notice the rose. The rose keeps appearing in my work. I am getting to water. And how you do a career based entirely upon intuition. And you know, they always say it's who you know, and that's absolutely true, but I've just gone where it's warm. And that has worked really well for me. So here's this rose that you're about to see again. This is part of the activist background. AIDS was happening. Of course, it was absolutely horrible. I saw in my husband's slide the protease, which you see down here in the left-hand corner. This is the enzyme that allowed the AIDS virus to replicate. And the same week that my exhibition at River Run Gallery came out, the protease inhibitor by Merck, where my husband was at the time, was actually approved by the FDA. So I was so thrilled by this coincidence. And I want you to note that rose again. I'm transforming the protease into a rose. I was thrilled at this, and people just thought I was crazy. But my life, I have found that coincidences are so powerful, and you must pay attention to them. All right, so I left that where I had prayer cards hanging down with all of these images of paintings I had made from faiths, from different spiritual backgrounds. And of course, this is a Buddha, which is where I finally landed. This is Mary. I have many, many pictures of Mary. And I did a film called Mary, Mary, with Chris Young, who is a wonderful director and cameraman. And that went to many film festivals. So here you have, now I'm still working on paper. I'm about to completely give up paper. But I wanted to show you this piece because science has always been a very important part of my work. And I have collaborated with a couple of scientists, and it's been great fun. And I'll show you what has come of that. And this image is the skeleton and organs of a bird, and this is called the Angel of the Annunciation, and all of my work involves research. This is one of the ways I keep myself inspired. When I'm doing a subject, I learn everything I can about it. I had books that high on Mary, people's PhD theses, Anyway, here I noticed this bird is actually flying into Mary's ear. I thought that was such a weird idea. So my angel has the feet of a man and the body of a bird, like Leda and the Swan. A 6-foot tall mezuzah with a scroll inside. This is a 50-foot rosary. So I'm telling you, I'm really working this whole theme, and the pictures, photographs of the work that I made appeared in a film that the interfaith movement used. So I got invited to come back to Seattle for an exhibition called From the Ground Up. It was curated by Brian Wallace at the Bellevue Art Museum. This is not at the museum. This is at in Duval, and I'm using the Fibonacci idea. Of course, you've got the shell there, the pine needles, and here's the sequence, the Fibonacci sequence, a meditation seat to look at that. I had very good luck. This sculpture site, I had the only building. Everybody else was outdoors. This was in a rainforest. So needless to say, I got a lot of people coming to visit my piece. The pine needles I shipped from Pennsylvania, and I shipped them FedEx. When they arrived, the curator told me that it came with 2 DEA agents who couldn't believe anybody was FedExing pine needles, and they went through every needle in the box. Found nothing, of course. All right, we're getting, here's the water. I learned that every single faith uses water as part of its story. And when I started painting water, of course, it's a lot easier to get a gallery when you're doing water than when you're doing rosaries and mezuzahs. So here in Norway is where I saw this waterfall, and I took this photograph. Women dance on that platform to the goddess. So my painting of her, this is 9 feet high. So Fishback Gallery picked me up, and the way that happened, well, I'll tell you in a minute. I want first to acknowledge how I became a much better painter. Somebody has their,
Yep.
is unmuted, I think.
Please mute everybody. Please mute. I love Michael Wilcox.
So here, yes, I know. This came out in 2002, and I had my first show at Fishback in 2000. And this book absolutely saved my life. And I understand that your own Liz Tucker is the certified instructor of this system, which is fabulous. And here's my palette. That, of course, the pliers are to unscrew the tube top sometimes. And you see, I got better. This is another show at the Fishback Gallery. I was with him until he left New York in 2015. He closed his gallery and went out of business. And like many other mid-level galleries in New York, they raised his rent so much. And combining that with the expense of art fairs, many dealers who were in this middle segment lost their galleries. I'm sure this is no news to any of you. So back to inspiration, you saw the really tall goddess. Okay, so Albert Bierstadt, I'm in New York. I'm suddenly seeing all these painters that I've never seen before. And these huge paintings, this, by the way, is totally unrealistic, but Frederick Church, I just loved these painters. And here the luminous took over, and I became obsessed with the way light and water interacted. Another shot from an exhibition there. This is a painting that I did about Puget Sound, and I want you to notice the ovoid forms that are in this painting. This is the photograph that I took the painting from. The Indian people, the First Nation peoples who were living on this land, were in their canoes fishing here. This is what they were looking at. So you can see the effect. See the haida, the ovoids. I became absolutely convinced that water has been trying to talk to artists for a long time. This is a very large painting. I think it's 75 by 54, something like that, maybe 80. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But these shapes, this is in Norway again, where I've been several times. My background is Norwegian, and I'm very close to my cousins in Tromsø, which is in the far north. And these forms, Edvard Munch saw this, all these forms, and you look at his paintings and you realize this is very much that what I saw of the reflections in the water in the fjords. So I talked about water and light. One of the things that I have done is steel palettes, and I'm sure many of you recognize Monet's palette here. I go with a little color book up to the museums, and when I see a palette I really like, I look up how to mix the colors, I take it home and I try it. I've stolen a lot of palettes. This is the Taj Mahal, this is the reflecting pool, and it reflects the way I felt looking at the Taj Mahal. So by this point, my relationship with water that started when I was a child, I am from the Pacific Northwest, and I've been surrounded by water my whole life. I had uncles who were fishermen, commercial fishermen. My father, grandparent, and both my sets of grandparents all fished. So I spent a lot of time in boats on the water, was very concerned about water quality as a result of this. These are some of the books that my work has been in, and I will talk about these different things, although iridescent light, I won't talk about that too much, except to say the title of this, would somebody turn off their, I can hear again the background. Thank you. The iridescent light that she talks about, this hit me when I was growing up. There was so much moisture in the air because they had not yet cut down all of the forests around us. Now we have these channels where you see lots of trees and you think you're going to see a lot of forest, and you get in a plane and you see how much trees have been removed from the Pacific Northwest. It's really shocking. So I don't have this light anymore, but when I was a girl, I'd stand on the porch and all of the moisture in the air would be sparkling. It affected the artists a lot here. So you saw the flag project. They picked this painting. I had a print made of it that they framed and put into their collection. And then this went into silk. And Kiki Smith had curated this exhibition. And there were 100 and some silk flags that opened the Rubin Museum. So in 2009, the woman who had been at the Rubin Museum, Lisa Schubert, and who I had gotten to know over the years, moved over to the cathedral and became the events coordinator there. And she came to one of my water shows and said, gee, Fredericka, could you give us your paintings for a water show? We're using this as a motif for a year. And I said, I don't have enough paintings to do that because my dealer was great at selling my work. But what I can do, and I showed up with a stack this high of people who did water paintings or water anything that was art. because I wanted to make sure I wasn't copying somebody else. I wanted to make sure other people weren't doing what I was doing. So I became very aware. Some artists don't want to know at all what other people are doing, but I'm not like that. I'm inspired by other artists. And I figure if somebody else is doing what I'm doing, I should move on. Anyway, we've got 40 artists. Lisa is one of these women who, she's fantastic. She raised so much money for us. We were able to fill the entire cathedral with 200 works of art by 40 artists. I was the guest curator. And it was a thrilling experience for me. I would stand against the walls of the cathedral and say, tell me what you want. What do you want? And I was going to water shows. I got to meet lots of eco artists. This, of course, William Kentridge was so generous. He gave us his tide table. Bill Viola gave us 2 pieces for the baptistry. And here's a water bowl installation of Victoria Vesna's. So the cathedral had a whole program going on with poetry, music, dancing, all about water. And at this time, this is 2011, and the people in Pennsylvania are suffering greatly because of fracking, but New Yorkers don't know too much about it yet. We started an educational center in the in the front of the cathedral. And the night that Food and Water Watch brought this together, 2,000 people came. So then you had all these politicians showing up. It was absolutely fascinating. And when I turned around, there were 40 card tables behind me with clean water people. And they were all exchanging cards, and I burst into tears. I realized if you can get an institution to allow you to be an umbrella, like the Cathedral St. John the Divine in New York was willing to do, you can really make a difference. And I think this exhibition and our programming was one of the tiny parts of why New York banned fracking. This is a piece of educational information that we had at the beginning. And I had many eco artists represented, but they were in a DVD because they had so much writing involved in their pieces to explain what they were doing. And 1 million people a year visit the cathedral. So I felt I needed to have something that would allow people to move on and not be stopping and reading. And then, of course, another way to be useful is to march. And I march with my little Think About Water sign. Water unites us all. This was the march in New York. Of course, before COVID, the climate march that happened, and a lot of people showed up for that. Meanwhile, Tricycle Magazine did a profile on me, and an artist, Andrew Chan Gladstone, made a film called Like a Circle in Water that went to, about my work, that went to a lot of film festivals. This, and you know, I'm talking about coincidence and magic, because I think one of the things that we have as artists, because we are able to access the unconscious mind, that world that connects us to so many things outside of our small selves, that if you keep your eyes open, it's amazing what happens. So this was my favorite painting. And the day after the opening, where it did not sell, the dealer, my dealer who I adored, told me that he was going to sell it at a 30% discount to an art consultant. And I said, oh, please, you know, don't do this. And we had an enormous fight. And at the end of the day, he agreed that at 5 o'clock, you know, if that would happen. At 4:45, a man walks in, falls in love with the painting, and buys it. Turns out he's from Geneva. And that painting was shipped back to Geneva. It sits on the shores of Lake Geneva in an office that looks over the lake. I just loved that so much, and no discount. So Amy Lipton was an eco artist who managed to convince me that I was one too. I didn't believe it for a minute. And she was supposed to do a group show at Clarkston University for the Beacon Institute of Rivers and Estuaries on water. And suddenly she just did not have time to pull it together. And she called me up and said, Fredericka, could you possibly show up for me and do this show? And I said, yes. I went to the people in New York who had collected my work and begged pieces back. The gallery gave me all that they had, and we had a very nice show there. Now, nobody knew me here. So I wanted to do an artist talk about water and how important it was and how we can't live without it, et cetera, and how to get the room full. So I invited two local bands, Mother Lode and Red, not the big ones that you know about. These are much smaller groups that were in Garrison and Beacon in New York, and asked them if they would come and do a couple of river songs and interact with each other, because there was some community, something or other going on between these two groups. And I thought it would be very interesting to get them in one room, which we did. And I was able to give my water spiel. The cathedral, again, they have value shows and they're very kind. I'm in them, it seems. This was the value of food. This painting, which is one that I love and I am keeping for myself. I lost a gallery very early on in my career, a very good New York gallery, because I refused to sell it, to give them a painting I had just finished. And they said, this is your best painting. And the fact that you're not giving it to us means that we're not going to have anything to do with you, and never do that again. On the other hand, Pat Steer told me, always make sure and keep your best work. And for when I had a gallery, I found that very hard to do, because Larry was very good at selling my work. Once I lost the gallery, it's not such an issue, of course. All right, but I've been keeping busy. Here we are. Seattle has a sewage spill that is absolutely horrible. I know the scientist who's very involved with Sage Bionetworks. He was the founder. And he asked me, Fredericka, can you do a talk about your work? And then is there a little program you'd like to do with the scientists? And I said, oh, yes, I want to do a program on that sewage spill. So I talked about my work, did a slideshow. I felt like I was the sorbet course in this very heavy scientific conference. And then I invited my friends to come, put on lab robes, and help do a performance. And this is Randy, who actually uses little squares and paints with water from everywhere. And I was using that idea, and he was there, and we told the scientists we wanted them to think about water that they really cared about. They were so not put off. We had gloves for them to wear. They were perfectly happy to paint with what they thought was polluted water, which of course actually wasn't. But it was so intimate what happened. The fact that they were thinking about water meant they were thinking about their childhood, and they were talking to each other, and everybody got to know each other so quickly. And then the Sage Bionetwork people took these posters, they made them into posters for us to use to march in the climate march the next day. And I designed this bottle, Think About Water, and gave it to all the scientists, because I felt no matter what field you're in as a scientist, you must think about water. Taking the water journeys on. I went to the Foundation of Art Education and Theory Conference in Columbus, Ohio with my friend Gianna Pilar Gonzalez. And we did water journeys with the professors, the art professors who showed up for that conference. And once again, we found that when people talked about their journeys, and of course, these are all artists, so they're doing the most wonderful drawings and sharing them with each other, the intimacy that happens with water journeys where people really start to come into contact with each other, barriers start to break down. It's exactly what we need. And the water flows, right? So more SAGE conferences, this one on algorithms, algorithm of processors that have rules to be followed in calculations or other problem-solving operations. Rule number 1, consider all the citizens in the Salish Sea. Rule number 2, always think about water. And I passed out this postcard. So I got invited to teach at Seattle Artists League. So I wanted to do an art and activism class there. And I started out the class by asking the people, after they had written about their favorite water places and what they loved about water, to get together and do drawings on these large sheets of paper. And I saw the person who runs it, Ruthie, go like this. I mean, she was just horrified, and she was right. I lost one of the students, but who left. This group actually tried to work together and to respond to each other. This group, on the other hand, had a couple of artists who were very interested in making their marks known. And I see 2 artists here, maybe 3, but the 4th one, maybe that's who walked out of the room. So the people who stayed, we did a book called Artists Celebrate the Salish Sea, a collaboration. And it has a lot in it about the Salish Sea, the Puget Sound Basin. And there's efforts in here to try to bring together the conservationists who, the fishermen, the hunters, the people who are also conservationists with the environmentalists. And right now there is such a split between them, and we just have to get everybody on board. This painting was a painting that I did specifically for this book. And while the class was happening, this whale called J35 of the southern resident killer whales, but these killer whales don't eat seals, they only eat salmon, and the salmon runs are so endangered they're starving to death. So they're having, and there's so much pollution, they're having trouble with births. They have a couple now. So this baby is born, first one in 4 years, and it dies like in a half an hour. This whale pushed that baby 1,800 miles and had other whales helping her. When the baby sank down, other whales would go pick it up and bring it back to her. 1,800 miles, guys. It really brought what was happening to the Salish Sea to people's attention. This is called The Value of Sanctuary. I mean, the exhibition this is in is called Value of Sanctuary. The painting is called Mediterranean Sanctuary. I was horrified by the number of people who were dying in the Mediterranean. So, and I didn't want to show dead bodies, so I showed cloth instead. And here is where the installation was put in the cathedral for the show, The Value of Sanctuary. Now, through my Buddhist community, so, you know, people talk about networking all the time and how important networking is. I think what is important is to bond closely to people that you really care about and see what happens in life with that. So through the person that was very much involved in this project, he put my name up And the jury selected me and 6 other women to fill this beautiful co-op building with art. I did 18 different sets of mirrored prints, and these are prints of my work. I pull out pieces from the work, and these were separate. So they were framed separately. So these went on either side of an elevator. And mirroring, now, and this painting went in the lobby. So this whole issue of mirroring was just capturing me because it feeds directly into the unconscious mind. It's like the Rorschach. And I am trying to get closer to water. So I started doing a series of photographs. These are at COCA in Seattle, which is the Council on Contemporary Art. And this is also water. This is a salt basin where there used to be an ocean in Australia. Nautilus magazine, through Beth Jacobs, through Lee Smolin, this is one of those like that, invited Philip Glass and I to do an article together on time. And both Philip is a friend of mine, again, through my Buddhist community. And we are both very interested in physics. So this was really fun for us to do. This is a painting, the one on the right, that came out of this. This was printed in Nautilus. Philip taught, the reason Lee Smolin wanted time put back into physics was because that's how you got something new. And Philip gets things new by constantly changing the people he works with. So I tried changing materials, and I went to a very slippery material working again in mixed media. And then years later, I decided I wanted to mirror that. And that was really a challenge because my mind had to work backwards. But it was fascinating because I had been in a boat photographing this, and it wasn't until I painted it that I realized the entire glacier was coming apart. We were actually very fortunate. So here we are 200 miles from the North Pole, and it's the midnight sun, and I am seeing the most incredible reflections in the water. And you see mirroring how you get these creatures. And I saw, you don't really need the mirror, how the Northern peoples had seen so many forms that they identified as nagas and trolls and other things like that. So then Tricycle Magazine, we did another article, Music, Meditation, Painting, and Dreaming, for that. And that was absolutely fascinating. Philip had gotten me into the mirrors, I don't know how many years before this article. He asked me to watch Jean Cocteau's films, and because they were so much about inspiration and creativity, and start to write down my dreams. And that really has been enormously helpful. So how did I get into Think About Water? I was lonely. COVID had happened. We were totally isolated. And I wasn't seeing anybody's exhibitions. And I just missed my friends so much. So I had the thinkaboutwater.com website that fed directly into the Fredericka Foster website. And I thought, why keep this to myself? Why not invite other artists to join me in this? So Gianna was the first one I invited because we were involved in this Water Journeys project together. She had been working with Water Journeys in Panama, and I had been, and she was in Panama when this started. So then we could meet each other online. And so then I invited many of the artists that I had met through the cathedral. Here is the list of the artists that we have. And I'm going to show you a picture of Stacy Levy because she's the one who came up with the idea that this is a support group for artists who are addicted to water. And all of these artists, many, I would say more than half of them, probably 2/3 of them are involved in public art. And it is such a difficult field to be in that having a group like this, we've kind of stopped inviting new members at this point for a while because we've been getting to know each other, and they have been helping with projects that they're doing. So somebody will have a project going on in Los Angeles and somebody will say, oh, I have a photographer I can turn you on to there. I have an engineer I know, that sort of thing. It's been really helpful. And we've done some things together when I was there, and of course, threatening the clean water tremendously. Many of us did photographs of our work, and then we all used the same format and sent 6x9-inch postcards to all the politicians at that time to try to get support for that bill. And then Doug Fogelson took on the task of, he's one of our members, of curating an exhibition for us. And he found some fantastic program that when you clicked on one of these paintings, you would get the story of the painting, and then you could feed through to the artist's website. And this exhibition, which lasted 3 months, was picked up by the National Academies of Science, Engineering. I can't believe it. I mean, we were in medicine, we were thrilled out of our minds. Here's Stacy. This picture was shown with, she just was interviewed by the NEA, and they did a wonderful interview about her and this work, which is showing how water underground is feeding into urban spaces. So you remember the protease, when I was trying to transform the protease? Well, I did a couple paintings trying to do the same thing with COVID-19. Here, this is water drowning COVID-19. Here again is that rose. This is COVID-19 transforming into a rose. Basher Erland is one of our members. The UN picked her this year to represent water. She has been working for National Geographic for years and years, representing water, speaking as water. And she was doing ice books and asked us all to do an ice book for her. And some of us did. I did this one. Usually her ice books seed rivers. They have river seeds in them, and she has a whole community involved. I am at the time I was on the Pacific coast, so I did oysters and kelp. And this ice book ended up at the Modern Art Museum in Cuenca, Ecuador, because they had a biennale there, and they invited Basha to represent the United States. She picked 25, or the curator, Bianca de la Torre, picked 25 of the ice books, and they blew them up and put them in the museum. So I was thrilled. Closest I'll probably ever get to a biennale. So this piece, 18 by 48 inches, is this is a model. I'm making a painting from this. I love this photograph. It was in an exhibition at Eco Art Space called Eco Consciousness. And this is a photograph from the catalog. And I love this because I feel it shows not only the destruction of water, but the idea of birth and hope. This is called Burning Water. It's a recent painting. back to magic. I'm in Seattle for the winter. It is horrible. It is so gray. It is so dark. I am so unhappy. And I take a photograph that I did of water in Tel Aviv where it's all golden and light and beautiful. And I decided I'm going to do this painting. So I'm working on this painting. The phone rings. It's someone I showed with, Glenn Hansen at Fishback Gallery. And Glenn said, Fredericka, I know this is random because you paint water, but by any chance, do you have anything yellow? And I said, right now I have in my hand cadmium yellow on my brush, and I will get this painting done for you. So I finished it, took it on the airplane home, dried it with the hairdryer, and took it to Long Island for the exhibit. And it was just like an art show in the 80s. Everybody was so real and sincere, and I had more fun at that opening. I just can't tell you. So then in May this year, I was part of this exhibit in New York, not far from our apartment there. We have a loft in Soho, and I could actually walk my painting to this exhibition, which made me really happy. I had a couple paintings in it, and I met all these wonderful women. It was so much fun. I really enjoyed this, and it was part of this. It was a satellite of Frieze New York. And of course, so many people come for Frieze. We got a lot of curators, we got a lot of critics. It was really fun. And this was one of the paintings that I had in the exhibition, and the other one was very small. This was 40 by 60. And it got hung so that when you walked in the door, there it was, which really made me happy. This just happened. So Eco Art Space, where I showed you, I had an exhibit there, pardon me, a painting there, and I'm now getting ready for another exhibit that they're sponsoring. I cannot, if you're involved in doing eco art, check out Eco Art Space. Patricia Watts runs it. She is phenomenal. And she does charge something, not much. I think it's $90 a year, but it is so worth it. You're part of a listserv that has a huge number of eco artists on it. Anyway, every week she spotlights somebody, and I got spotlighted last week, which I was very excited about. So that's it for me. And here's my Instagram handle at Fredericka Foster. Thinkaboutwater.com, FrederickAFoster.com, and I hope to see you guys online. So I'm open for questions. Thank you very much. And I guess I should stop sharing my screen now. How do I?
That was amazing, Fredericka. Thank you so, so much. I'm going to remove your spotlight if that's okay, so you can see who's talking. And then
Yeah, I'd love
I'll
that.
try going back and forth if I can.
Hi, everybody.
If you want Fredericka spotlighted, let me know, and then I can just spotlight her again. So it's up to you.
Oh, no, I'm good.
Joan, you do. You know what? Okay, well, let's leave it like this just for now. Anyone have any questions?
You work from photographs.
Pardon?
You work from photographs.
Absolutely. I have done some paintings where I'm not working from photographs. And I'm working on one right now on groundwater. Of course, there's no photograph. You can't, no, you can't photograph groundwater. So I'm having my imagination and a lot of scientific information. I'm working with a scientist on this, who is an expert on groundwater and has been, in fact, in your part of the country, working on the Colorado River. So I have found that when I don't work from photographs, it takes me 10 times as long. And water has rules. And if you don't follow some of them, it ceases to be believable. Now, some people can intellectually understand those rules, but I can't. And I have right-left dyslexia. So it's just impossible for me to make sense of, you get the swell here and the thing there. And so the photograph is very helpful to me. I usually work from several of them. And as you may have seen in some of the examples I've shown you, I use them very loosely. I use them to establish my composition. And then I steal somebody's palette, or, it depends on the mood I'm in. I try not to, I'm not a realist in the sense of photographic realism. When I was at Fishback, I was astonished to learn that everybody projected. And I went home and I thought, oh, that's a great idea. And I tried it. Oh my God, it drove me absolutely out of my mind. I could no more work from a projection than I could, I couldn't do it. So I do a very loose grid that I start with. I begin with, I'm learning acrylics now. Oh my goodness, because oil paints are so toxic. It's such a different animal, but it's faster. And I've come off of the easel now. I'm getting the material stretched, and then I'm cutting it off and putting it on the wall, and then I'm sewing it into fabric. And I'm just learning how to do this. I am taking hemmed linen back to New York with me, and I did get one piece put into heavy fabric, and I gessoed it, and I got help from a woman who made sails to do that because it was really hard to get through the material. That's a really long answer to your question. So I work from photographs, but I use them as prompts, as help with composition, more than as exact models. Thank you. Good question.
When you choose your color palette, are you thinking of an emotion that you're trying to express, or the idea of the conservation idea that you're trying to, what influences your choice of color palette in addition to Michael Wilcox?
It definitely, I believe it's emotion. It's emotion. The thing about art that is so fabulous, it is a form of direct mental targeting. Just, I hope there's some animators here or game makers. You know that art is a form of direct mental targeting. So the part of the mind that is hit is the same part of the mind that gives us a sense of awe, that connects us to everything else, moves us beyond the small self to something greater than ourselves. And I think art, certainly, you go and you sit in front of a Monet and you see all these other people, they come in the room talking. All of a sudden they stop talking. Everybody sits down. They look, they stare at this giant Monet. Nobody says a word. And after half an hour, they get up and leave. Some people don't leave then. It's opens the heart. And I'm so sad that on the screen, my paintings look much less abstract than they look when you see them in person. When you see them in person, you're aware you're looking through many layers. So it takes more time. You don't just you know, you see them on screen, it takes 1/10 of a second. I'm always astonished when I sell anything on the internet because I think it's so hard to get what I'm doing when you're not looking at it in person. It is about emotion. It's the idea. I'm very inspired by Jane Goodall and her work. If people love something, they will take care of it and protect it. And I get to talk about the fact that we are water. Our eyes are 98% water. I think this is why artists are so drawn to water, because we're using our eyes all the time, we're seeing. And because we have that in common, we all share the same water, just like we all share the same air. There's only a limited amount of this fresh water that keeps us alive. It connects us. So that's what I'm trying to express in my work. Although now the shows coming up are in nonprofit organizations, and I'm trying to make them more specific, like talking about groundwater, for example. Talking about one of the pieces is called Listening to Water. I've become more and more aware I need to just shut up while I'm working, not have thoughts about it, and just see what the water is trying to say to me as I do the painting. So my personal relationship with water, as all these years have gone by, is getting very intimate. And I have absolutely no idea where that's going to take me. So far, it's taken me off the stretched canvas so that I can be more of a gypsy and easily take the work around and put it up anywhere. So thanks for that question. It's a great one.
You know what? Does anyone else? I have another question.
Hi, Alice.
Hi.
Hi, Alice.
Hello. Do I get my question?
Yes.
Fredericka, this is a wonderful talk. It's so inspiring. And I really love seeing your early work and getting a glimpse of a period of transition as an artist you made. You started with very spiritual work, and it seemed as though there was a time when suddenly it crystallized and you saw how you could do everything you wanted to do in the surface of water, that you could have such a variety of paintings with that unifying theme. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that moment, that aha moment, because I could see it in your work.
Thank you, Alice. So Chuck Close made a statement that I read, and it said, the job of the artist is to find their subject matter. And I thought, oh, that is so ridiculous. This was when I was very young. It should be to find your style. But in truth, your style finds you. As different as my paintings are, people who know my work well, occasionally my dealer would sell them to Paramount for different films. And not, the image, not the not the painting. And people would call me up and say, Fredericka, I just saw one of your paintings in this movie. And so they recognized that it was my work, even though it wasn't signed. There was no way that they could know. Style finds you. But it really is, for me, it was my job to find my subject matter. And when I started painting water, I realized I'd come home to my subject matter. You just know that you're right. It was this aha moment. All of a sudden, everything came together. And I thought, oh my goodness, it's like when I became an artist, I had so many interests, but art was the only thing that involved me spiritually, mentally, physically. I love the physicality of painting. Into everything, it brought in everything for me. And when I got into water, the same thing happened. Pretty easy, because there isn't a single living thing on this earth that doesn't have water in it. And I'm interested in life. That's what I'm interested in. I think we have to commit ourselves to life now. Every single one of us at every level, we must do it. This is my, I'm sorry. I hate doing that. I must do it. I must do it. I must do it. I don't want to tell anybody else what to do because I don't have any idea what I'm doing. I am just showing up. That's what I do. Thanks. Yeah, Zoni.
Fredericka, I'm glad you talked about that because I've been thinking about that since you mentioned that to me and Liz yesterday at our Zoom test. Now that, so you're a great artist with passion, at the same time, you're a water activist, right? So does that ever, so people that see your exhibition, maybe half are artists or into your creativity and half have the passion for, water conservation, all the things that you talk about. How do you reconcile that? I mean, does that ever become a challenge or?
I was just asked to be part of a conference that's happening on the environment. And to my astonishment, they hadn't included water. So I mentioned that and they said, oh, you should do water. So I said, okay, I'll do the water. And it's an art show. They have ideas. I have no idea how this is all going to work out. So far, I have not seen. Before I believed I was an eco-artist, I thought this was a real problem. But then when my social practice became this group, which supports artists who are working with water, then I thought, okay, I'm not doing what, they're out there doing active things in the community, writing books. They're doing much more than I am. So my internal conflict was, I never called myself an eco-artist until other people started calling me an eco-artist. And then the conflict went away. But before that, I thought, you can't be an eco-artist when you're just working as hard as you can to make as beautiful paintings as it is possible for you to make, filled with light. But light, to me, is so important. And if somebody looks at my paintings, and I have gotten this feedback that has been wonderful, people saying to me, oh my gosh, I saw the shapes in your paintings and I thought, well, she totally made that up. And then I was sitting by the water and all of a sudden I saw them. I realized they were there. So when that happened, suddenly that person had a completely different relationship with water when they started to see those shapes and internalize those shapes and realize that water was part of them. So I think it works. I don't know how it works. I certainly saw at the cathedral that people learned a lot about water they didn't know about. So I don't know if I could get my message across without, having my little artist night where I talk and say, this is the story. And then I have the whole thing I give about water data and, more simply scientific issues around water. But I was just talking to a group of high school kids and they're working on the environment. They're giving me so much hope. So I always try, and they put me in this little film they made, and other water activists were there, and they were, telling exactly how desperate this situation is right now. And you all know it, I'm sure, how desperate this is with water. I mean, how could you not? You're in the West. And And I ended with hope. I ended with the fact that I honestly believe that we can pull together, we can change this, we have time to change it, and let's get going, right? And congratulating these kids on the fact that they are aware, alert, and they're learning and they're changing the way they think, and they're going to change the world. And hopefully we can help them. I think that's our job. So I have tremendous hope, but I also think it's really important to always end with hope, because otherwise people will just give up, right? And fiddle while
Sounds
Rome
great.
burns.
Thank you. Thank you. That's
Thank
really
you.
great.
You know, it's interesting because what you're really asking everyone to do is to be good stewards. And while we can see all the scientific stuff, not everyone obviously relates to that, and they will completely block it out. But when they start to see the images, it becomes much more imbibed into one's soul without having to bang someone on the head. And so I think what you do is absolutely beautiful and extraordinary. And I don't want to say soulful because it's so overworked, yet it is so soulful. And it's just really, really lovely. And thank you for what you're doing. It's for your activism, for your beautiful work, for reminding us about us. You know, it's really fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Since you mentioned the word soul, Emerson said, the soul is light.
Yes, indeed, indeed, indeed. Yeah. If anyone else has anything else to add or say. Right, then Fredericka, thank you so much. That was absolutely extraordinary. What an amazing way to start our year. I just, Alice, thank you for setting this up. Zoni, thank you for following up and making this happen. And of course, Fredericka, thank you for all the beautiful work that you're doing. And to Women Painters West who came today, thank you guys so much for coming and showing up. And if anyone wants to watch this again, just let us know. We've recorded it and we can send it out. If someone who isn't here wants to watch it, they just need to pay their $10 and we will send them the recording. We'll only keep it on our web for 30 days and then Zoom takes it away. So download it to your computer if you want to watch it.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Right.
Thank you, Fredericka.
Inspiring.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to end the recording.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.